Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. So what I like to do is show you how to write the equation of a hyperbola when the center is not at the origin. So in our previous video, we had something very similar to this, but our center was always at the origin, meaning our h and our k were always at 0, 0. Well, now we need to take the information given and find our h and our k, as well as to determine our a and our b. So the first thing we want to do in this case is, again, to plot the information that we were given. So what I'm going to do in this case is they actually gave me my center here, so that's going to be at negative 2, 1. Label that center. I have my vertex, which is at negative 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And my co-vertex, which is at negative 3, 1. Now remember the relationship between the center, your vertices, and your foci. The distance from the center to your vertices is a. So in this case, I'm actually given my a. A is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the distance from your center to your co-vertice is b, which in this case is 1. So I'm given a and I'm given b. That's exactly what I need. And I'm also given my center, which is my h and my k, which I can just label just like this. The only piece of information we do not know is which equation should we use. Should we use the equation where we have a horizontal transverse axis, or should we use the equation where we have a vertical transverse axis? Well, remember, the vertical transverse axis is where the vertices and foci lie, where the conjugate axis is the axis where the co-vertices lie. And you can see I can draw kind of two little axes. And you notice that the vertices and the center lie on a vertical transverse axis. Therefore, we're going to use this equation. So I'm simply just going to write the equation before I forget it. And before I forget, that's the equation that I'm using. Minus x minus h squared over b squared equals 1. OK, so I know k. K here is 1. So I'm just going to write in y minus 1. And I'm just going to put it in parentheses just so I remind myself what I'm doing. A here is, a is 4. So 4 squared minus x minus h minus a negative 2 over b squared, which is 1. OK? And just note, I just wanted to make sure that you understood it's always x minus y minus. And then I put in parentheses my h and my k so we can make sure that we're doing the math correctly. Y minus 1 is just y minus 1 squared. 4 squared is 16. Minus x minus a negative 2 is going to be x plus 2 over 1 equals 1. You don't need to write the 1 there. You could leave it out, but we'll just leave it there because it looks good. OK, so the next one, we're not given the vertice, or we're not given the center. So now we need to determine the center. And sometimes that comes up with a little bit of problem with students is figuring out where the center is. Because if it's not at the origin, and they don't give it to you, how do we determine where exactly the center is? So I'm actually going to go back over to this problem here real quick. Remember, the distance from your center to your vertices is 4. Well, that's going to be going up as well as down. 1, 2, 3, 4. The distance from the center to your co-vertices is b. That goes to the left as well as to the right. What I want you to notice about the center is it is in the exact middle of your two co-vertices as well as your two vertices. And that'd be the same if we graphed our foci. It'd be in the middle of our two foci as well. So the first thing we're going to want to do is plot the information again that we are given. So we're given our two vertices, which is at 1, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4. So there's your two vertices. Automatically, I can just stop right here. When my one vertice was above my center, I knew it was a vertical transverse axis. Now I know that I'm going to be having a horizontal transverse axis. So therefore, I can just immediately go to this equation and start writing down that equation before I forget which equation to use. And again, remember, this is the equation for a horizontal major axis because your a is under the x. This is the equation for the vertical major axis because your a is under the y. OK, and then let's plot the foci, which is at 0, 4 and 10, 4. OK, now again, what I mentioned is that the center is the midpoint of your two vertices. It would also be the midpoint of your two foci or the midpoint of your two co-vertices. So now you could use the midpoint formula if you wanted to. You could do 1 plus 9 would be 10, divided by 2 is going to be 5. And what you notice is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, that is going to be your center. Since you've graphed it, you can also just look at the graph and kind of determine where it goes. OK, so now we know that the distance from the center to your vertice is, I'm going to count, or you could just use the, let's write down the center. Center is 5, 4. That's your h, that's your k. So the distance here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 4. So we could say A is equal to 4. The distance from the center to your foci then is going to be 5. So C equals 5. Now we just need to figure out B per our equation. So remember, C squared equals A squared plus B squared, which is provided to us. So B squared is 25 equals A squared, which is 16, plus B squared. Minus 16 minus 16, 9 equals B squared. We don't need to figure out B. We just need to figure out what B squared is. So now I can just plug in the information. So my h here is 5, so it's x minus 5 squared over a squared. A is 4, so a squared is 16, minus y minus k. I did that one correctly. Y minus k is 1. Yep. Here, my y, my k is 4, so it's y minus 4 squared over b squared, which is 9, equals 1. There you go. OK, in the next example, we're now given vertices and the asymptotes. And the asymptotes, I actually like having the asymptotes because if you remember, if you look at the equation for the asymptotes, if I know it's a horizontal transverse axis, then that fraction is b over a. If it's a vertical transverse axis, then I know that slope is a over b. So I can easily find a and b, but the only thing I don't know right now, which I need to figure out, is where's the center, and is it a horizontal or a transverse axis? So I'm going to plot the information. Rather than plotting the asymptotes, which I could do, but it just doesn't really seem like too much fun, I'll graph the vertices, 0, 2, and 6, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Vertices. I know that now I have vertices. I have, again, a horizontal major axis. So I'm going to write the equation that I'm going to be using. X minus h squared over a squared minus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. Okay? Now I need to find the midpoint of my two vertices to find my center. So it's going to be 6. It's going to be 3, 2. Center. So therefore, I will write the center. Three, 2, which is my h and my k. Again, I just found the midpoint, or you can just look at your graph and find the center. And then last but not least, I need to figure out, so A is the distance from my center to my vertice, which is 1, 2, 3. So A is equal to 3, which confirms, right? It's a horizontal major axis, so that's our equation. We know A is 3, which is right there. That means by the top, the numerator has to be my B, which is 2. So B equals 2. So now, just plugging in the information, I have x minus h, which is 3, squared over a squared, which is 3 squared, which is 9, minus y minus k, which in this case is 2, divided by b squared, which is 2 squared, which is 4, equals 1. OK? All right, last but not least here, now we're given vertices and a point. Now, the graphing the point is really not going to help us. We know the graph is going to go through that, but really kind of understanding what that point represents is helpful. So let's go ahead and graph the vertices first. By graphing the vertices, I have 2, 3, and 2, negative 3. Oops, that's over there. Automatically, I can determine that the center, so there's my two vertices. I know now I have a vertical transverse axis. OK, so it's now since I have a vertical transverse axis, I know that I'm going to be using the same equation, this equation, or vertical transverse axis. I'm going to be using that equation. Right. I'm going to be using this equation for my vertical transverse axis. But I know my value of A, which is 1, 2, 3. So I could say A is equal to 3. I don't know what B is. I can determine the center as the midpoint of my two vertices, which is 2, 0. So that takes care of my h and my k. My problem that I'm having is now I don't know what B is. I need to somehow figure out what B is. So I go back through this information of my point. What does the point represent? Well, the point when we're writing an equation is an infinite set of points, right? Well, as long as it's a continuous function or a continuous equation. But if the graph is continuous, that means the graph sets on infinite many x and y points. So all a point that lies on the graph represents is a common x and y coordinate of the point that's on that graph. So we can represent that as x and y. And I'm going to write that in there because that's very important here as now I write the equation for this. I'm just making sure that my microphone is working. OK. All right. So I'm not going to write down the blank equation. I'm just going to write in everything I know because I'm going to have a little bit extra algebra to do here. So I have this is vertical. So it's going to be y minus 0. Actually, let's do y minus 0. So that's going to be y squared over a. A is going to be 9 minus x minus h, which is 2, squared over b squared equals 1. OK, so we know, actually, let's write this in there. We know this is 9, right? And then we know that's 2. Now, what we can do is plug in our points, x and y, in for x, or our point x, y, in for x and y. So x is 0, and y is going to be 5. OK, so now all I need to do is simplify this. So what I do is I get 25 over 9. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. So minus 4 over b squared equals 1. All right? Now I need to somehow solve for b squared. Well, what I'll do is I'll subtract 25 ninths on both sides. And therefore, that gives me, I'm going to have to erase that over there, negative 4 over b squared equals, I'm going to rewrite 1 as 9 over 9. 9 over 9 minus 25 over 9, because 9 over 9 is the same thing as 1, right? OK, then I'll come back over here and finish my equation. So therefore, I have negative 4 over b squared is equal to 9 minus, so remember when you're subtracting, since they have the same denominators, you just subtract the numerators. 9 minus 25 is a negative 16 over 9. Now I can apply cross multiplication or the cross product. So therefore, I get a negative 16b squared equals negative 36. OK, divide by negative 16. Divide by negative 16. B squared is going to equal. Now, I can't divide that. 16 doesn't divide into that evenly. I thought my answer, I guess I had a 1 there. I don't know why that 1 came in front. Oh, well, it is 2. 2 comma 0, 2, 3, 2, negative 3. OK. So there's, let's say I can divide a 4. So it's going to be 9/4. OK, that actually works out. So therefore, b equals 3/2. Actually, we don't really care. We just want to know 9/4, right? OK, so what I'll do is I'll write this. I'm going to erase. OK, so take a picture, stop it, whatever else you need right here. So now I know b squared is going to be 9/4. Actually, I can put this in right here. All right, so now I know b squared is 9/4. So I go back to my original equation. I'm going to plug in x squared over a squared, which is 9, minus, oh wait, that was y, wasn't it? Y squared minus 9 over x minus 2 squared over 9/4 equals 1. So you could leave it as a fraction. A lot of times, sometimes another simplified way to write this would be without a fraction, which would be multiplying by its reciprocal. So you could also write it as y squared over 9 minus 4x minus 2 squared over 9 equals 1. So that's just another way to kind of write it. Sorry, I'm kind of losing a little space there. But that's another way to write it if you don't want to have fractions as a denominator. But that's perfectly fine the way that I wrote it. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is how you write the equation of a hyperbola when the center is not at the origin. Thanks. Thanks.